This week we read about the courageous act of Pinchas, who stood up and took action even though, nobody else was. Even Moshe and Aaron stood there. They didn't necessarily take action, but Pinchas knew what the right thing to do was. And when we read the commentaries, we see that he wasn't even praised for his action. There were many who ridiculed him, who felt that he was wrong for what he did, who didn't give him the proper respect for his action. But we know it was the right thing to do. And we see that historically, we don't know anybody else who had such a story. Pinchas, of course, became Eliyahu Hanavi, the great prophet, who, as far as we knew, never even died. We don't know anybody else who was recorded to have had that kind of status. Eliyahu Hanavi, the great, that tremendous action he did put him in a league of his own. And he knew it was the right thing to do, even though it may have not been the most popular thing. But he acted based on what was right. And that's the lesson to us. Sometimes you have to take action and do what's right, even though it may not be popular. It reminds me of a story. There was a fellow, a business person for many years. He had a successful business, but he found himself in hard times. He found himself very, very difficult times. In fact, his business was in big trouble. He was about to go bankrupt, and he desperately needed a loan of $500,000 to bail him out of his problem. And he goes to the bank, tries to get the loan, and they tell him, you don't have enough assets to get this loan. You don't own enough of your house to get such a big loan. You need some collateral. You can't get that loan. So he doesn't know what to do. His business is in such danger. He goes over to an old friend of his, and he asks his friend, "Listen, would you be willing to sign on my loan documentation? Would you be willing to put your house up as collateral for my loan? I really need this loan." And the friend, he's an old friend for many years. He understands the question, and he says, give me some time to think about it. He sits down with his wife, and he's like thinking, boy, I really would love to help him, and I would do anything to try to help him, get back on track, and I can see how this would help him. But, are we crazy? What am I thinking? I'm going to put my house on the line? If he doesn't pay, my house is getting collected. How can I do that? And they sit there and they talk about it, and they decide, what? It's the right thing to do. We're going to do it. We're going to help another person, help another Jew, help another friend. It might not be easy, but it's the right thing to do. And they decide to go down there, and they come down to the bank, and they're preparing the paperwork, and they're ready to sign. And the banker tells them, "1 second, where do you live?" And they look at the address. It's in Far Rockaway, New York. And the banker says, you need flood insurance. You don't have any flood insurance. And they're like, flood insurance in Far Rockaway? Who has flood insurance? No one has flood insurance in Far Rockaway. Why would we need flood insurance? And the bank says, "I'm sorry, we can't give a loan. What if there's a flood? What if we need to be able to collect from somewhere? We can't give that loan without flood insurance." So they say, "Okay, what is it going to cost to get flood insurance?" And they get a quote, $3,000 for the year. And now they're looking at each other again. We're crazy enough to come in here, to take this, to sign on the paperwork. We're even crazier if we think we're going to spend an extra $3,000, on flood insurance just so he can get his loan. But they again sit there, they discuss, and they resolve, we are going to give this guy the loan. We'll pay the $3,000, whatever it is. We're going to help this person out, and that'll be our little mitzvah. All right? So they pay the $3,000, they get their flood insurance, they get the guy the loan. He gets his loan, they all go home, and he uses his tremendous loan and helps him out, recovers his business, etc. 6 months later, Hurricane Sandy hits the New York area. And I don't know if you were on top of the news at the time, but it was devastating. And no one expected the devastation that ended up happening. It ended up just hitting areas near the water tremendously. And this neighborhood was underwater. There were homes that had gotten such damage. In fact, this person's home, who signed on the documentation, his home was just destroyed. And from the whole neighborhood, the only person that had flood insurance was this couple that signed on the loan documentation. And because they signed on that documentation, they were saved. They would have lost a lot more, than $500,000. Their house was saved. They ended up, getting everything recovered, all their possessions, everything. And it goes to show you, sometimes it's not easy to do the right thing. It's hard. Sometimes you have to overcome a lot of obstacles. But doing the right thing, you never lose. And that's the message. I wish everybody a wonderful Shabbos.